The Galactic Defense Academy floated in orbit around a dead moon, far from any planet that could be called home. It was a massive station made of metal and glass, filled with training rooms, classrooms, and living quarters for thousands of cadets. Species from 12 different star nations sent their best young warriors here to learn how to fight together, how to protect the coalition from any threat that might come from the dark spaces between stars. Humans had only been part of the coalition for 30 years. They were still the newcomers, still trying to prove that they belonged among species that had traveled to stars for thousands of years. Every human cadet felt this pressure. Every human cadet tried their hardest to show they were worthy. Every human cadet except one. Maya Collins sat in the back row of Combat Theory 401. Her body slouched in her chair like she might slide onto the floor at any moment. Her brown hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her uniform was clean but wrinkled. Her eyes were half closed, and she looked like someone who had not slept well in years. Around her, the classroom buzzed with activity. Vorthani warriors sat in the front rows, their bodies covered in silver and green scales that caught the light when they moved. They were tall, strong, and proud. Their home world was a place of constant storms, and their people had evolved to be tough and quick. They compared combat scores on their datapads and spoke in their hissing language about who had performed best in the morning drills. Behind them sat the Krullish cadets. They had 4 arms each, and their skin was the color of dark stone. Their eyes were large and yellow, and they could see in complete darkness. Between lectures, they practiced blade forms with their training weapons, moving all 4 arms in patterns that humans could barely follow. There were also Tellurian cadets with their blue skin and telepathic abilities, and Dravik cadets whose bodies were covered in short brown fur. All of them seemed focused, determined, and hungry to prove themselves. Maya Yan. The instructor for Combat Theory 401 was a Vorthani named Zorvax. He stood at the front of the room, his scales a deep silver color that showed his age and experience. He had fought in 3 wars and had the scars to prove it. When he spoke, everyone listened. Everyone except Maya. "The Orion Formation," Zorvax said, his voice filling the room, was developed by human military strategists during the border wars. It is considered one of the finest small unit tactics ever created by your species. He looked around the room at the human cadets, who sat up straighter at the mention of their people's achievements. However, Zorvax continued, like all tactics, it has weaknesses. Can anyone tell me the primary flaw in the Orion Formation? Several hands went up. Zorvax ignored them and instead looked toward the back of the room, where Maya was examining her fingernails with great interest. "Cadet Collins," he called out, "perhaps you can enlighten us." The room turned to look at her. Some of the other cadets smirked. Everyone knew that Maya Collins was the weakest human in their year. She barely passed her physical tests. Her combat simulation scores were in the bottom third of the class. She never volunteered for anything and seemed completely uninterested in becoming a soldier. Maya looked up slowly, blinking as if she had just woken from a nap. "The Orion Formation," she said, her voice flat and bored. "It leaves the flanks exposed during the 3rd rotation, sir. When the forward units advance to engage, the side guards have to pivot, and for about 2 seconds, anyone attacking from a 45-degree angle has a clear shot at the command position." The answer was perfect. Zorvax stared at her for a long moment, surprised by the detail and accuracy. Then he grunted and turned back to the board. "Correct. Now, as I was saying," Maya returned to examining her fingernails. Her squad leader was a Krullish named Torvak. He had 4 arms, keen yellow eyes, and endless patience that Maya had tested many times. After class, he caught up with her in the corridor. "Collins," he said, falling into step beside her, "that answer you gave, It was good. Better than good. Why do you not show this knowledge more often? Maya shrugged. I got lucky. Read it somewhere once. You did not get lucky. You knew details that were not in our textbooks. Where did you learn about the pivot timing? I really don't remember, Torvak. Does it matter? The Krellish studied her with his 4 eyes. In his culture, hiding one's abilities was considered shameful. Strength was meant to be displayed, not concealed. He could not understand why any warrior would choose to appear weak. We have combat simulations tomorrow, he said. Perhaps you could try harder this time. For the squad. Maya gave him a small smile that did not reach her eyes. I'll do my best. They both knew she was lying. That night, Maya sat alone in her quarters, a small room with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out at the stars. She did not sleep. Instead, she sat in the darkness and remembered. She remembered being 5 years old and learning to take apart a weapon blindfolded. She remembered being 8 and running combat drills until her legs gave out, then being forced to run more. She remembered being 12 and fighting other children in a gray room while scientists watched through glass windows and took notes. Project Prometheus. That was what they had called it. A secret human military program designed to create the perfect soldiers. They had taken children with certain genetic markers and enhanced them, trained them, shaped them into weapons. Maya had been Subject 7. The project had been shut down 15 years ago when politicians decided it was too dangerous, too unethical, too expensive. The children who survived had been scattered, given new identities, and told to disappear. Most of them had died anyway, unable to adjust to normal life. Their bodies breaking down without the specialized medical care the program had provided. Maya had survived. She had learned to hide what she was. She had practiced being slow, being clumsy, being ordinary. She had developed a persona of mediocrity so complete that she sometimes forgot it was a mask. She had enrolled in the academy because she was tired of running. She thought that maybe, if she could just be a normal soldier, a normal person, she could finally have something like a real life. She did not want to be a weapon anymore. She wanted to be a person, but old habits died hard. When Zorvax had called on her in class, her training had kicked in automatically. She had given an answer that no ordinary cadet would know. She had slipped. Just for a moment, Maya looked out at the stars and wondered how much longer she could keep pretending. Somewhere in the Academy's computer systems, a flag had been placed on her file years ago, buried deep where only the most senior officers could find it. The flag contained a single word, Prometheus. And in an office on the other side of the station, Commander Victor Hayes was working late. He was the Academy's human liaison, responsible for all human cadets and their integration with the Coalition. He was also unknown to most, a former intelligence officer who had spent years hunting down the survivors of Project Prometheus. He had just received an alert. One of his automated searches had found something. A cadet whose background check showed tiny inconsistencies, whose medical records had strange gaps, whose movement patterns showed training that no civilian should have. Hayes pulled up her file and stared at the image of a young woman with tired eyes and messy brown hair. Maya Collins. He did not know yet what she was, but he intended to find out, and when he did, everything would change. The annual cross-species combat evaluation was the most important test of the year. For 3 days, cadets were placed in the mixed squads and dropped into combat simulations that grew harder and harder. Their performance was recorded by the Academy's computers, every movement tracked, every decision logged. These logs would determine their final rankings and their future assignments. Maya had done well at being unremarkable. Through scenarios 1, 2, and 3, she had stayed in the middle of her squad, following orders, doing exactly what was expected, nothing more. She let others take the lead. She missed shots that she should have made. She moved a little slower than she could have moved. Her squad mates had learned to work around her. Torvik, as squad leader, assigned her to rear guard positions where she would see the least action. The other cadets, two humans named Luke Bennett and Carrie Dawson, and a Vorthani named Sarix, had stopped expecting anything from her. Scenario 4 loading, the computer announced. Urban combat environment. Objective: reach extraction point while neutralizing hostile forces. The simulation chamber hummed, and suddenly Maya and her squad were standing in a destroyed city. Buildings rose around them, broken and burned. The sky was gray with smoke. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear the sound of weapons fire. "Move out," Torvik ordered. Standard formation. "Collins, watch our backs." Maya nodded and took her position at the rear of the squad. They began moving through the streets, stepping over rubble, checking corners. The city was quiet except for their footsteps and the distant sounds of battle. Then everything went wrong. The first drone appeared from behind a fallen wall. It was fast, a flying machine with red sensors for eyes and weapons built into its body. Sarek saw it first and shouted a warning. But before anyone could react, 3 more drones appeared. Then 6 more. Then a dozen. They were surrounded. "Take cover," Torvik roared, and the squad scattered. Luke and Carrie dove behind a burned car. Sarek pressed himself against the doorway. Torvik used his 4 arms to climb up a broken wall, trying to get a better angle. Maya simply stood there, watching the drones circle. The first shots came fast. Luke cried out as a training bolt hit his armor, and his suit locked up, signaling that he was out of the fight. Carrie lasted 3 seconds longer before she too went down. Sarek managed to destroy 2 drones before he was hit from behind. Torvik fought hard. His 4 arms moved in a blur, firing in multiple directions at once. He took out 4 drones before the remaining machines focused their fire on him. His armor lit up red, and he collapsed. Eliminated. Maya was alone. 12 drones remained, circling her like predators around wounded prey. Their red sensors locked onto her position. In the observation room above the simulation chamber, Instructor Zorvax prepared to mark another elimination. The other instructors had already turned their attention to different screens, watching more promising candidates. Then something changed. Maya's posture shifted. The slouch disappeared from her shoulders. Her eyes, which had been half closed and bored for months, suddenly became sharp and clear. She took a breath, and in that single breath, she stopped being Cadet Collins. She became what Project Prometheus had made her. The first drone died before anyone realized she had moved. She crossed the distance between them in less than a second, her hand closing around its sensor array and ripping it free. Before the machine could react, she used its body as a shield against incoming fire. Then threw it into 2 of its companions. 3 down in 1.2 seconds. She moved through the remaining drones like water through a broken dam. There was no wasted motion. Every step took her exactly where she needed to be. Every strike hit exactly where it would do the most damage. She did not fight like a cadet learning combat. She fought like someone who had been designed for this, built for this, trained since childhood to be something beyond human. A drone fired at her from the left. She was not there when the bolt arrived. She was already behind it, her fingers finding the weak point in its armor plating, tearing out the power cell that kept it alive. 4 down. 5. 6. In the observation room. Instructor Zorvax stopped preparing the elimination report. His silver scales went pale. He had seen many warriors fight. He had trained soldiers from a dozen species. He had never seen anything like this. "What is she doing?" he whispered. The Academy's tracking computer was struggling to follow Maya's movements. She was moving faster than the system was designed to record. Her reaction time, which had been measured at a slow and ordinary level during her entrance exams, was now showing numbers that should have been impossible for any species in the coalition. 7 drones down. 8. 9. Commander Hayes received an alert on his datapad. He had been in his office, still reviewing the file on Cadet Collins, when the system flagged an anomaly in the combat simulations. He switched to a live feed and felt his heart stop. He knew those movements. He had studied recordings of Project Prometheus subjects before. He had seen what they could do. 10 drones. 11. The last drone tried to run. Its programming told it that retreat was the better option. Maya did not let it escape. She grabbed a piece of broken concrete from the ground and threw it with perfect accuracy. The stone punched through the drone's central processor, and it crashed to the ground in a shower of sparks. 12 drones, eliminated in 6 seconds. Maya stood alone in the simulated ruins, her breathing calm, her face showing no emotion. Around her, the metal bodies of the machines sparked and smoked. She looked down at her hands as if surprised by what they had done. Then the simulation ended, and the destroyed city faded away, replaced by the blank walls of the training chamber. The door opened, and Maya found herself facing a squad of Academy security officers, their weapons raised and pointed at her chest. "Cadet Collins," the lead officer said, "you are ordered to come with us. Do not resist." Maya looked at the weapons, at the nervous faces of the officers, and she sighed. She had worked so hard to be invisible. She had practiced being weak for 15 years. And now, in 6 seconds, she had destroyed everything. "I won't resist," she said quietly. They took her to an interrogation room deep in the Academy's security section. It was a small room with white walls, a metal table, and 2 chairs. They left her there alone for hours. In the observation room, the instructors replayed the combat logs again and again. They slowed the footage down to 1/10 speed, then 100th. They analyzed every movement, every strike, every impossible reaction. "This is not human," Zorvac said finally. "No human can move like this." "She is human," another instructor said. A Tellurian named Vex, whose telepathic abilities made her an expert at reading people. "I have touched her mind. She is human. But there is something else there too. Something trained into her so deeply that it has become part of her biology." Commander Hayes stood at the back of the room, watching the footage with growing certainty. He had spent years looking for the survivors of Project Prometheus. He had believed they were all dead or disappeared beyond finding. He had been wrong. "Clear the room," he ordered. "This is now a classified matter. No one speaks of what they saw today." The instructors filed out, glancing back at the frozen image on the screen. Maya Collins standing among the fallen drones, her eyes sharp as knives. Hayes waited until he was alone, then pulled up every file he had on Project Prometheus. He compared movement patterns, reaction times, combat styles. The match was undeniable. He walked down to the interrogation room and opened the door. Maya looked up at him with those 2 sharp eyes, and Hayes saw something he had not expected. She looked tired. Not physically tired, but tired in a way that went deeper. Like someone who had been carrying a weight for too long. He sat down across from her and placed the combat logs on the table. "Do you want to tell me the truth?" he said. "Or should I tell you what I already know?" Maya looked at the footage of herself destroying the drones. She watched her own impossible movements play out on a small screen. And for the first time in 15 years, she stopped pretending. "Where do you want me to start?" she asked. The interrogation room was cold and quiet. Maya sat on one side of the metal table, her hands folded in front of her. Commander Hayes sat on the other side, a datapad between them showing the combat footage that had changed everything. Project Prometheus was shut down in 2147, Hayes said. his voice calm but his eyes intense. That was 15 years ago. The official records say all participants were either deceased or accounted for. Every single one. Maya said nothing. The program was classified at the highest level. Hayes continued. Most people in the coalition don't even know it existed. But I know. I was part of the team assigned to track down any survivors after the shutdown. We spent 3 years searching. We found nothing. You weren't supposed to find anything, Maya said quietly. That was the point. Hayes leaned forward. Tell me. From the beginning. Maya was silent for a long moment. Then she took a breath and began to speak. I was 4 years old when they took me. My parents were told I had a rare genetic condition and needed special treatment. They signed papers they didn't understand. The next day, I was on a transport ship heading to a facility that officially didn't exist. She looked at the wall, her eyes seeing something far away. There were 20 of us at first. 20 children with certain genetic markers that made us suitable for enhancement. They modified our nervous systems to increase reaction speed. They strengthened our bones and muscles beyond normal human limits. They trained us in combat every day from sunrise to sunset. What happened to the others? Hayes asked. The modifications didn't work on everyone. Some children died during the procedures. Others survived, but their bodies couldn't handle the changes. By the time I was 10, there were only 8 of us left. Maya's voice was flat, like she was reading from a report. We were called subjects, not children. Subject 1, Subject 2, and so on. I was Subject 7. They never used our real names. I'm not sure any of us remembered what our real names were. Hayes pulled up a file on his datapad. The program was shut down after a senator discovered what was happening. The funding was cut, the facilities were destroyed, and the surviving subjects were supposed to be rehabilitated and given new identities. That's what the official story says, Maya agreed. The truth is different. What is the truth? Maya finally looked at him. Her eyes were hard and old, far older than her 20-something face. When the politicians decided we were too dangerous, they didn't want to rehabilitate us. They wanted to eliminate the problem permanently. Someone decided that dead children were easier to explain than living weapons. Hayes felt sick. He had suspected something like this, but hearing it confirmed was different. How did you survive? One of the scientists warned us, Dr. Ellen Brooks. She had worked with us since the beginning, and I think she actually cared about us in her own way. She helped 3 of us escape before the cleanup team arrived. 3 of you? Subject 3, Subject 12, and me. We split up after we escaped. It was safer that way. I don't know what happened to the others. I spent the next 15 years learning how to be invisible. Maya looked down at her hands. Do you know how hard it is to pretend to be slow when your body wants to be fast? To fail tests when you know all the answers? To act tired when you could run for hours without stopping? Why did you come to the academy? Hayes asked. If you wanted to stay hidden, this seems like the worst possible place, because I was tired of hiding. Maya's voice cracked slightly, the first emotion she had shown. I spent 15 years being nothing, being no one. I thought maybe if I could just be a normal soldier, a normal person, I could have something like a life. I wasn't trying to use my abilities. I was trying to escape them, but you couldn't. No. When those drones surrounded my squad, when I saw them fall one by one, something inside me just took over. 15 years of hiding, and it all came apart in 6 seconds. Hayes sat back in his chair, processing everything. He had expected to find a threat, an infiltrator, maybe an enemy agent. Instead, he had found a broken weapon trying desperately to become human again. Before he could respond, the room shook. A deep rumble passed through the station, followed by alarms that began screaming from every speaker. Warning, the computer announced. Unknown vessels detected. All personnel to battle stations. Hayes grabbed his datapad and pulled up external sensors. What he saw made his blood run cold. Ships. Hundreds of ships. They hung in space like a swarm of locusts, their hulls covered in patterns that no coalition species used. They were dark and angular, designed for war and nothing else. Zirathi. He whispered. The Zirathi were the nightmare that parents used to scare children. They were the enemy that the coalition had prepared for, but never truly believed would come. For 20 years, they had stayed beyond the borders, raiding occasionally, but never attacking in force. Until now. They brought a fleet, Hayes said, his voice hollow. They're not raiding. They're invading. The station shook again as the first weapons hit the outer shields. Maya watched the sensor data scroll across the screen, her trained mind calculating numbers that Hayes could barely comprehend. They've brought enough ships to destroy this station and everything in this sector, she said. Your shields won't hold more than an hour. Your defenses can't stop that many boarding pods. We need to evacuate the cadets. There's no time. Look at their formation. They're positioning to cut off escape routes. They planned this carefully. Hayes stared at the screen, watching his worst fears unfold in real time. Thousands of cadets, the future of coalition defense, were about to be slaughtered by an enemy they had only read about in history files. Can you help? He asked, turning to Maya. She met his eyes. I'm a prisoner. I was about to be investigated for crimes against the coalition. That investigation can wait. Right now, I need to know if you can fight. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Outside the room, she could hear people running, shouting orders. She could hear the distant sound of explosions as Zirathi weapons struck the station's hull. She thought about the 15 years she had spent hiding. She thought about all the times she had held herself back, made herself small, pretended to be weak. She thought about the other cadets, the ones who had dismissed her as a failure, the ones who were about to face real combat for the first time in their lives. They would die. Most of them would die, no matter what she did. But some might live. If she stopped hiding, if she became what Project Prometheus had made her, some of them might survive. Yes, she said finally. I can fight. Hayes unlocked the door to the interrogation room. Then fight. Maya stood up. The mask of the weak, tired cadet fell away completely. In its place was something harder, sharper, more dangerous. I'll need a weapon, she said. Hayes handed her his sidearm. I'll get you something better as soon as I can. For now, head to Section 7. That's where the first boarding pods will hit. Maya took the weapon and checked it with movements so fast and automatic that Hayes could barely follow them. Then she looked at him one last time. If I die fighting for the coalition, what happens to my record? Do I die as a criminal or as a soldier? You die as a hero, Hayes said. I'll make sure of it. Maya nodded once, then walked out of the room and into the chaos of a station under attack. In the corridors. She passed cadets running in panic, instructors trying to organize defenses, medical teams preparing for casualties. They did not recognize her. They saw just another face in the crowd. They did not see the weapon walking among them. Maya moved toward Section 7, toward the sound of weapons fire, toward the enemy that had finally arrived. For 15 years, she had hidden what she was. Tonight, the Zirathi would learn what humanity could truly create when they were afraid. The Zirathi boarding pod hit Section 7 like a fist punching through paper. Metal screamed and tore as the pod's cutting arms ripped through the station's hull. Atmosphere rushed out into space before emergency shields flickered to life, sealing the breach. Then the pod opened, and the nightmares came out. The Zirathi were tall, taller than any human or Vorthani. Their bodies were covered in dark plates that served as both skin and armor. They had too many limbs, 4 legs, and 4 arms, and they moved with a skittering speed that made them hard to track. Their faces had no recognizable features, just clusters of black eyes and mouths, filled with needle-like teeth. They poured out of the boarding pod like water from a broken pipe. The cadets in Section 7, mostly first years who had never seen real combat, froze in terror. They had trained against simulations, against targets that fell when you shot them. They had not trained against creatures that screamed as they charged, that kept coming even when wounded, that moved like nightmares given flesh. The first line of defenders fell in seconds. Maya arrived just as the second line was breaking. She came around a corner and saw the corridor ahead filled with chaos. Cadets were falling back, firing wildly. HFY warriors advanced through the defensive fire, their armored plates absorbing shots that would have killed anything else. She did not hesitate. She did not think. She simply acted. The first HFY died before it knew she was there. Maya crossed the distance between them in a blur of motion, Commander High's sidearm barking 3 times. Each shot found a gap in the creature's armor, hitting the soft flesh beneath. The warrior collapsed, its too many limbs twitching. The other HFY turned toward this new threat. Maya was already moving. She grabbed a fallen cadet's rifle and used it to block a strike from a HFY blade, then turned the block into a throw that sent the creature crashing into 2 of its companions. 4 seconds. 3 HFY down. The surviving cadets stared at her with wide eyes. They did not recognize the failure who sat in the back of their classes. They did not see the woman who always finished last in combat drills. They saw something else entirely. "Fall back to the junction," Maya ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Form a defensive line. Do not let them pass." The cadets obeyed. There was something in her voice that made obedience automatic. They retreated in order while Maya held the corridor alone. More HFY came through the breach. Maya met them with the cold precision of a weapon designed for exactly this moment. She moved between them like smoke, never staying in one place long enough to be hit. Her stolen rifle ran dry, and she used it as a club until it broke. Then she took weapons from fallen enemies and used those instead. The corridor became a course, graveyard dot in the Academy's command center. The surviving officers watched sensor data that they could barely believe. Section 7 had been written off as lost, its defenders overwhelmed by the initial boarding force. Now something was happening there that the sensors struggled to track. "What is that?" the tactical officer asked, watching a single green dot holding position against dozens of red ones. "That's a human life sign, but the movement patterns are impossible," another officer finished. "I know." More boarding pods hit the station. Sections 3, 8, and 12 reported breaches. The Academy's defenses were scattered, trying to fight on multiple fronts at once. It was exactly what the HFY wanted, a slow, grinding destruction that would end with every defender dead. Maya fought her way from Section 7 to Section 3, leaving a trail of HFY bodies behind her. She found pockets of survivors, gave them quick orders, and moved on. She did not stop to rest. She did not slow down. She became the thing that the HFY had never expected to find on this station. She became the nightmare that hunted nightmares dot in Section 8. She found Torvak. Her former squad leader was wounded, 2 of his 4 arms hanging useless at his sides. He had gathered a group of cadets behind an improvised barricade and was holding the corridor through sheer stubborn will when Maya appeared, sliding under his HFY blade and driving her fist through the soft tissue under its chin. Torvik stared at her like she was a ghost. "Collins?" he said, unable to process what he was seeing. "Stay down," Maya replied. "I've got this." She cleared the corridor in less than a minute. When the last HFY fell, she turned back to the wounded cadets. "Can you move?" she asked Torvak. "I can move. But what in the name of all ancestors are you? I trained with you for a year. You could barely hold a weapon. I was hiding. I'm not hiding anymore." She helped them to their feet and pointed toward the command center. "Get there. Tell them to concentrate defenses around the primary hangar. That's where the Zirathi commander will be. They always lead from the front. How do you know that?" "I know a lot of things. Go." Torvik went. He was a warrior born, and he knew when to follow orders. But he looked back at Maya as he left, and the look in his yellow eyes was something close to awe. Maya continued her hunt. The station was vast, and the Zirathi had landed multiple boarding teams. She could not be everywhere at once, but she moved faster than any single defender should have been able to move. She appeared where the fighting was heaviest, turned the tide, and moved on before the survivors could process what they had seen. Stories began to spread through the defenders. A human woman who moved like lightning. A cadet who had destroyed a dozen Zirathi with her bare hands. A ghost who appeared from nowhere and left only enemy dead behind her. The Zirathi noticed too. Their attack had been planned carefully. They had expected the Academy's defenses to crumble quickly, as they always did when facing Zirathi shock troops. Instead, something was fighting back. Something was killing their warriors in numbers that should not have been possible. The Zirathi commander, a massive creature called a warlord, received reports from its surviving troops with growing anger. A single human was disrupting the entire invasion. A single human was making its forces look weak. This would not be tolerated. Maya was clearing a corridor in Section 12 when she felt it. A presence that made the air feel heavy. She turned and saw the Zirathi warlord for the first time. It was huge, twice the size of the regular warriors. Its armor plates were thicker, darker, scarred from countless battles. In each of its four hands, it held a weapon that hummed with deadly energy. "You are the one," the warlord said, its voice like grinding stone. "You are the human who kills my warriors." Maya raised her weapon. "And you're the one who's going to die next." The warlord laughed, a horrible sound. "Brave words from prey. Your kind has always been weak, soft, easy to break. Your kind has never met something like me. We shall see." The warlord charged. It moved faster than anything that Sai should have been able to move. Its weapons swept in arcs that would have cut a normal human in half. Maya was not a normal human. She dodged the first strike, rolled under the second, and came up inside the warlord's guard. Her blade found a gap in its armor and drew black blood. The creature roared and struck at her with its other arms, but she was already gone, moving to its blind side. The fight lasted longer than any of Maya's previous encounters. The warlord was fast, strong, and experienced. It had killed thousands in its long life. But Maya had been created to fight things exactly like this. She had been designed for moments when humanity needed a weapon that could match any enemy. She took wounds. A blade cut her arm. An impact knocked her into a wall hard enough to crack the metal. But she kept fighting, kept moving, kept finding the gaps in the warlord's defenses. Finally, she saw her opening. The warlord overextended on a thrust, leaving its throat exposed for just a fraction of a second. Maya drove her blade home with every ounce of strength her enhanced body could produce. The warlord fell down. Maya stood over its body, breathing hard, blood dripping from her wounds. Around her, the remaining Zirathi warriors stared at the corpse of their commander. Then, one by one, they began to retreat. Without their warlord, the invasion lost its heart. The Zirathi pulled back to their boarding pods and fled toward their ships. The station's defenses, reorganized and reinforced, drove them off. When the last enemy ship jumped away, the Academy was still standing. Battered, Damaged, mourning its dead, but still standing, Maya collapsed against the wall and let the exhaustion finally take her. She had revealed everything she was. She had become the weapon she had tried so hard to leave behind, but the academy was safe. The cadets were alive. For the first time in 15 years, she had used her abilities to protect instead of to hide. Maybe, she thought as medics rushed to her side, that was enough. 3 weeks after the Zerathi attack, Maya stood before a coalition tribunal. The room was large and formal, filled with admirals and ambassadors from 12 different species. Holographic screens displayed the combat logs from the battle, showing footage that had been reviewed hundreds of times by military experts across the galaxy. Maya wore a simple uniform. Her wounds had healed quickly, faster than any normal humans would have, which was just more evidence for the tribunal to consider. She stood at attention and waited for judgment. Admiral Korath, a Vorthani with scales that had turned white with age, spoke first. Cadet Maya Collins, you are here because the events of 3 weeks ago have raised serious questions about your identity, your background, and your place in coalition society. I understand. Admiral, we have reviewed the evidence. We have studied the combat logs. We have read the files on Project Prometheus that Commander Hayes provided to this tribunal. The old Vorthani paused. The program was illegal under both human and coalition law. The experiments performed on you and the other children were violations of basic rights that every civilized species holds sacred. Maya said nothing. There was nothing to say. However, Admiral Korath continued. The crimes of Project Prometheus were not your crimes. You were a victim, not a perpetrator. The question before this tribunal is not whether to punish you, but what to do with you now that your abilities have been revealed. Ambassador Vex, the Tellurian, spoke next. Her voice was soft, but it carried through the room clearly. I have touched Cadet Collins' mind with her permission. I have seen her memories, her fears, her hopes. I can confirm that she enrolled in the academy with no intention of using her abilities for harmful purposes. She genuinely wanted to be ordinary. She genuinely wanted to escape what she was made to be. That may be true, said Admiral Chung, a human woman with a stern face. But the fact remains that she concealed her true nature from coalition authorities. She passed entrance exams by deliberately performing below her abilities. She lied to her instructors, her squad mates, and everyone who interacted with her. I did, Maya said. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I hid because I was afraid. I hid because everyone I cared about in Project Prometheus was either dead or missing. I hid because I thought that if people knew what I was, they would treat me like a weapon instead of a person. She looked around the room at the gathered officers and diplomats. I spent 15 years being invisible. I practiced being slow, being weak, being forgettable. I got so good at it that sometimes I forgot I was pretending. And then the Zerathi came, and people I had trained with were dying, and I couldn't pretend anymore. Commander Hayes stood up from his seat in the observer section. Permission to address the tribunal? Admiral Korath nodded. Granted. Hayes walked to the center of the room. I have spent years hunting survivors of Project Prometheus. I believed they were dangerous, that they needed to be contained for the safety of the coalition. Meeting Cadet Collins has changed my perspective. He pulled up new data on the holographic displays. These are the casualty reports from the Zerathi attack. Without Cadet Collins' intervention, our models estimate that the death toll would have been approximately 3,000 cadets and staff. Instead, we lost 412. The numbers hung in the air, heavy with meaning. She didn't fight because she was ordered to, Hayes continued. She didn't fight because she wanted glory or recognition. She fought because people were dying, and she had the ability to save them. That's not the behavior of a weapon. That's the behavior of a soldier. The tribunal deliberated for hours while Maya waited in a holding room. She did not know what would happen to her. She did not know if she would be imprisoned, exiled, or something worse. Part of her almost didn't care. She was tired of hiding, tired of pretending. Whatever happened next, at least she would face it as herself. When they finally called her back, the room had changed. The formal atmosphere had softened. Several of the admirals were talking quietly among themselves, and Maya caught fragments of conversation that suggested they had reached some kind of agreement. Admiral Korath spoke again. The tribunal has reached a decision. Maya Collins, you are not guilty of any crime under coalition law. The actions of Project Prometheus were not your responsibility, and your decision to conceal your abilities, while problematic, does not rise to the level of criminal conduct. Maya felt something loosen in her chest. She had been holding her breath without realizing it. However, the Admiral continued, your abilities represent a significant asset to coalition defense. The Zerathi attack has shown that we face threats we are not fully prepared for. The question is whether you are willing to use your abilities in service of the coalition, openly and with full knowledge of what you are. You're offering me a position? We are offering you a choice. You can return to anonymity if you wish. We will provide you with a new identity, resources to start over, protection from anyone who might seek to exploit your abilities. You can disappear and live whatever kind of life you want. Maya considered this. A month ago, she would have taken that offer without hesitation. A month ago, all she wanted was to be invisible. What's the other option? She asked. Admiral Chun answered. Coalition Special Operations has requested you by name. They want to create a new unit, one designed to respond to threats that conventional forces cannot handle. You would lead that unit. You would train others, share what you know, help develop new approaches to combat and defense. You want me to be a weapon again? No, Commander Hayes said. We want you to be a soldier. There's a difference. Weapons don't have choices. Soldiers do. We're asking you to choose to fight, not commanding you to. Maya thought about the years she had spent hiding. She thought about the fear she had carried, the loneliness, the constant effort of pretending to be less than she was. She thought about the cadets who had died in the attack, and the ones who had survived because she had stopped pretending. If I join Special Operations, she said slowly, I have conditions. Name them. No more programs like Prometheus. No more experiments on children. If you want enhanced soldiers, you find volunteers, adults who understand what they're agreeing to. And I want to be involved in that process. I want to make sure no one else goes through what I went through. The admirals exchanged looks. Admiral Chan nodded. Those terms are acceptable. And one more thing. I want access to any information about the other survivors. Subject 3 and Subject 12. If they're out there, if they're hiding like I was, I want to find them. I want to give them the same choice you're giving me. That can be arranged. Maya took a deep breath. For 15 years, she had been running from what Project Prometheus had made her. Now she had a chance to take that legacy and turn it into something better. Then I accept, she said. 6 months later, Maya stood on the bridge of a coalition cruiser, watching young officers train in combat techniques that she had developed. They were not enhanced like her, not modified and engineered from childhood. But they were learning to be more than they had been, to push beyond their limits, to become something greater. A young cadet approached her. Commander Collins? Permission to ask a question? Go ahead. The stories about you. About the Academy attack. Are they true? Did you really fight a Zerathi warlord alone? Maya smiled. It was a real smile, something she had rarely allowed herself in the years of hiding. The stories are mostly true, though they usually leave out the part where I was terrified the entire time. You were afraid? Of course I was. Being strong doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you fight anyway. The cadet nodded, processing this. Is it true that you hid your abilities for 15 years? That you pretended to be ordinary? Yes. I thought hiding was the same as being safe. I thought if I made myself small enough, nothing bad could happen to me. Maya looked out at the stars. I was wrong. Hiding your strength doesn't protect anyone. It just means you're not there when people need you. So what changed? I realized that the things that make us different, the things we're afraid of, sometimes those are exactly the things the world needs. She turned back to the cadet. Humanity spent centuries trying to catch up to other species. We felt weak, vulnerable, like we didn't belong among the stars. But we're not weak. We're adaptable. We're creative. We're stubborn in ways that other species can't understand. She paused. And sometimes, when we're really pushed, we become something that the universe has never seen before. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to embrace. The cadet saluted and returned to training. Maya watched them go, thinking about how far she had come from the broken child in the Project Prometheus facility. From the tired cadet hiding in the back of classrooms, she had spent 15 years afraid of her own strength. Now she used that strength to protect others, to train the next generation, to make sure that when the darkness came again, humanity would be ready. The Zirathi were still out there. Other threats lurked in the spaces between stars. The universe was dangerous, and it didn't care about the survival of any single species. But humanity had something that the universe hadn't counted on. They had the ability to turn their fear into weapons, their pain into purpose, their victims into warriors.